Come on in, my friend. How are you? Sorry I had to delay our session for an hour because I was stuck in traffic. So what do you want to talk about today? I am all ears, my friend. I heard the sigh before I even saw him. It was the kind of sigh that carried weight, not just the exhaustion of a long day, but the heaviness of something unresolved, something pressing. It was the sound of a man staring at the numbers in his bank account and knowing they wouldn't be enough. "Rent's due again," he muttered, flopping down on my couch. His backpack slid off his shoulder onto the floor with a thud. I didn't say anything right away. What was there to say? I could throw a useless cliche, "It'll be fine. Things will work out." But I knew better. Jason had been struggling for months now. It started small, delayed payments here and there, a little borrowing, a little juggling. But lately, the gaps had widened. Every month, rent came knocking, and every month, Jason looked more and more like a man who was running out of places to turn. "How much are you short?" I finally asked. He leaned his head back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. 500. Maybe 6, if I want to eat this week. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Money had never been something we talked about much before. Back when things were good, when Jason had a steady job and a life that didn't feel like it was held together by duct tape and hope, these conversations didn't exist. But life had a way of flipping tables. His job at the warehouse had been stable until it wasn't. A round of layoffs, too many people and not enough hours. They cut him first. At first, he was optimistic. "I'll find something fast," he told me back then, weeks ago. Maybe even something better. But fast hadn't happened, and better felt like a joke now. "You asked your landlord for more time?" I asked. Jason let out a dry laugh. "You think Mr. Callahan does extensions? That old man probably marks the calendar with a red pen and starts counting pennies every time the first of the month gets close." I had met Callahan once. He had the kind of eyes that saw through excuses and a voice that sounded like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to disappoint him. "What about gigs? You doing those delivery apps still?" Jason ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tightening. "Yeah. But it's been slow." "And the damn car," he stopped himself, shaking his head. "The car." Right. His beat-up Honda had decided it was a perfect time to betray him, breaking down just as he needed it most. The repair shop had quoted him more than he could afford, so now he was stuck doing what he could on foot. But you couldn't exactly deliver pizzas and groceries fast enough to make ends meet when your only mode of transport was your own 2 legs. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "How bad is it? Like, could Callahan actually kick you out?" Jason exhaled slowly. "Yeah. He gave me one warning last time. Said next time, no exceptions. He's got a waiting list for the unit." I cursed under my breath. I hated this, watching him struggle, feeling like I should be doing more. But money was tight for me too. I wasn't swimming in cash, and even though I wanted to offer him what he needed, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Still, I couldn't just sit there. "Look, man," I said after a long pause. "I can spot you a couple hundred. It's not much, but..." Jason held up a hand. "Nah. I appreciate it, but I can't keep borrowing from people. It's not fair." "Yeah, well, life's not fair," I shot back. "You think I'm gonna sit here and let you end up sleeping on a bench somewhere?" He gave me a tired smile, but his eyes were shadowed with something heavier. "I'll figure something out," he said, like he was trying to convince himself more than me. The room felt quiet. I wished I had a solution. A real one. I wished I could tell him that next week, next month it would all turn around. But I wasn't gonna lie to him. Jason rubbed his face with both hands and sighed. You ever feel like life's just waiting for you to slip? Like it's just standing there, watching, ready to push you over the second you lose your balance? I nodded. Yeah. But you're still standing, aren't you? He let out a small laugh. Barely. But you are. Jason looked at me then, something in his face softening just a little. Thanks, man. For what? He shrugged. For not making me feel like a loser. I scoffed. You're not a loser. You're just in a tight spot. There's a difference. He didn't argue, but he didn't look convinced either. We sat there in silence for a while, two friends, both trying to pretend like neither of us felt as helpless as we did. I never thought I'd see Jason like this. He was always the guy with a plan, the one who had it together. Back in college, he was the one who juggled 2 part-time jobs, stayed on top of his classes, and still had time to show up for our late-night food runs like it was nothing. I used to think he had it all figured out, that if anyone was gonna make it big, it'd be him. But life had a way of humbling people. Now, he sat on my couch in my cabin like he was carrying the weight of the entire city on his shoulders. He rubbed his face with both hands, his fingers lingering at his temples like he was trying to hold his thoughts together. You eat yet? I asked, breaking the silence. He shook his head. I sighed and stood up. All right, we're fixing that first. I walked to the kitchen and rummaged through my fridge. There wasn't much, some leftover pasta, a few eggs, a couple of takeout boxes that I was afraid to open. I grabbed the pasta and tossed it in the microwave. Jason didn't argue. He never turned down food, especially not lately. The microwave beeped, and I handed him the plate. He ate like a guy who wasn't sure when his next meal was coming. That alone told me everything I needed to know. You ever think about moving back home? I asked cautiously. Jason paused mid-bite and exhaled sharply through his nose. Yeah. And then I remember that my mom is barely keeping up with her own rent. If I go back, I'm just another mouth to feed. I nodded. I didn't have parents to run back to, but I knew what he meant. Pride was a hell of a thing, and so was the guilt of feeling like a burden. Have you talked to Matt? He might be able to hook you up with something at his office, I suggested. Jason snorted. You think they're hiring guys who just got fired from stacking boxes? It's worth a shot, man. Anything's better than this. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the floor, twirling his fork in the pasta like he was considering something. I thought about selling my Xbox, he admitted. Might get a couple $100 for it. I frowned. That Xbox was one of the only things he had left from before everything went to hell. You really want to do that? He shrugged. Don't really have a choice. I leaned back against the couch. Man, this sucks. Jason chuckled, but it was hollow. That's the understatement of the year. We sat in silence again. The thing about financial problems was that they had a way of creeping into every part of your life. They weren't just about money, they were about dignity, about feeling like you were losing yourself piece by piece. I could see it happening to Jason. He wasn't just broke. He was tired. You're gonna get through this, I said, more to convince myself than him. Yeah, he asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I nodded. And when you do, I'm gonna remind you about this moment so I can guilt trip you into buying me dinner when you're rich. That finally got a real laugh out of him. You're an ass, he muttered, shaking his head. I know. But at least I'm a generous ass who lets you eat my terrible leftover pasta. Jason smirked, but I could see it, the exhaustion, the quiet fear that this wasn't just a rough patch, that maybe this was just life now. I didn't have all the answers. I couldn't magically fix things. But I could do this. I could remind him he wasn't alone. And sometimes that was enough to keep a person going. Jason sat on the edge of the worn-out couch, hands clasped together, his thumbs tracing slow, absent-minded circles. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, filling the cabin with warmth that neither of us could quite absorb. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, but in here, it was just the two of us and the weight he carried. "I don't know, man," Jason muttered, staring at the fire like it might offer answers. "It's just been hitting me all at once. Rinse 2 in a week, and I've got nothing left. Feels like I'm just treading water, waiting to go under." I took a slow breath, leaning back in the old wooden chair, letting it creak under my weight. I'd known Jason before when we were in college, always the guy who had a plan, always the one who kept moving. Seeing him like this, his shoulders curled inward like he was bracing for a blow, felt wrong. "That's why we're here," I said, motioning around my therapy cabin. "A reset, remember?" Jason let out a short laugh, but it had no real humor. "Yeah, some reset." "What?" I stared at the trees for a weekend and suddenly my problems disappear. I shrugged. "Not disappear. But maybe they won't feel like they're crushing you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just feel stuck. I work my ass off, and it's still not enough. Every month, it's the same thing. Just scraping by. And I can't even tell my folks. Hell, they think I've got it together." The fire popped, sending a small ember drifting into the air before it faded into nothing. "You don't have to have it together all the time," I said. "It's okay to be in the mess of it." Jason shook his head. "I don't want to be in the mess. I want to be out of it." I didn't have an answer for that. Not one that would make the weight in his chest go away. But I knew that sitting in silence, in this cabin that smelled of cedar and old memories, was better than sitting alone in a cramped apartment worrying about numbers in a bank account. So I didn't say anything else. Just let the fire burn, let the night settle around us. Like I said, Jason had always been the guy with the plan. Back in college, he was the one who mapped our road trips, who figured out how to sneak into concerts, who got us through finals week with a color-coded study schedule. He was the one who had everything under control. But now he was unraveling. He hadn't told me just how bad things had gotten until last week. We'd been grabbing a drink after work, sitting at our usual spot at the bar, when he finally let it slip. "I know you have this cabin therapy session going on and you help people deal with their problems. Well, I need help. Like mental health help, because rent is due and I am broke," he'd admitted, staring into his glass like it held all his failures. "Not just this month. Last month too. I borrowed from my credit card to cover it, and now I'm screwed on that too." I'd never seen him look so small before. That night, I didn't tell him what to do. I didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, I offered the only thing I could, the cabin. A break. A moment to step back from the edge before he fell completely. And now, here we were. Sitting in front of a fire in the middle of nowhere, while Jason tried to hold himself together with nothing but sheer will. Letting it out. The first night, we didn't talk much. We ate in near silence, canned chili heated over the fireplace, slices of bread that were slightly stale but still good enough. Afterward, Jason stared at the flames while I cleaned up. By the time we turned in for the night, I wasn't sure if this was helping him at all. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of Jason stepping outside. I stayed in bed for a while, listening to the quiet creak of the cabin settling, before finally pushing the blanket off and stepping onto the cold wooden floor. I found him sitting on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, staring out into the dark forest. "You all right?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just exhaled, slow and heavy. "I feel like I'm failing," he admitted, voice raw. "Like no matter what I do, I'm just waiting to fall apart completely." I sat down next to him, pulling my hoodie tighter against the night air. "You're not failing," I said. "You're struggling. That's different. Feels the same." We sat there for a long time, listening to the wind in the trees, the distant hoot of an owl. "You know what the worst part is?" he finally said. "I can't tell my parents. They think I'm doing fine. They think I'm thriving." I nodded. "Yeah, I get that. I mean, how do you even say it? Hey Mom, Dad, remember all that money you spent on my degree? The years of sacrifices you made? Yeah, well, I can't even afford rent right now." I didn't have an answer for that. But I knew that sitting in silence, here in this cabin that smelled of cedar and old memories, was better than sitting alone in a cramped apartment worrying about numbers in a bank account. The next morning, I made coffee while Jason sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the mist that curled through the trees. "You ever wonder what it'd be like to just not go back?" he asked after a while. I handed him a cup of coffee and sat down next to him. "To the city?" "Yeah. Just stay here. Live out in the woods. No rent, no credit card bills, no stress." I smirked. "You'd last 2 days before you miss Wi-Fi." He laughed, shaking his head. "Probably. But still. It's a nice thought." We spent the rest of the morning in the woods, following old trails we'd walked 100 times before. Jason didn't talk much, but his shoulders were looser. His hands weren't fidgeting as much. Maybe the cabin really was working its magic. By the time the sun started dipping low, he turned to me, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Thanks for bringing me here." I clapped him on the shoulder. "Anytime." Heading back. By the time we packed up to leave, Jason looked different. Not fixed, life didn't work like that, but lighter. "Still stressed?" I asked as we loaded up the car. "Oh yeah," he said. "Still broke as hell, still don't know how I'm gonna cover rent. But at least I don't feel like I'm trying anymore." I smiled, shutting the trunk. That's a start. As we pulled away from the cabin, back toward the real world, I knew Jason's problems weren't over. But at least, for now, he had enough air to keep going. And sometimes, that was enough. I went back to the cabin and I was so happy that I was able to help a friend heal or take a pause from life miseries. My cabin therapy session is not for everyone, but at least I make sure that I help everyone in need of someone to talk to. I am not a psychiatrist, but I do my best to help people, or I guess I can call them patients, since a lot of them are seeking my advice in this cabin in the middle of the woods. I walked back to my cabin. Michelle waved at me. She was one of my patients who requested to stay a little longer. She is currently suffering from domestic abuse. I went inside the cabin and sat down. I can feel my body twitching a little bit from the other day's workout. I like helping people, but sometimes when I am by myself I feel like I need some help too. But I am okay though. I'd rather help people in need than assess my own personal problems. I turned on the television and the show Cheaters is on. I feel bad for those people on the screen because I feel like they need some sort of a therapy session too. I fell asleep listening to birds chirping. I am not even sure if I slept in the afternoon or if it was late afternoon. All I can say is that I really love this job. I never would have thought in a million years that I would be a cabin therapist, but here I am helping people each day. I am ready to help a new friend who needs my advice and my support.